Welcome. I'm your host, Malcolm Gallagher. From our BizVision studios in the UK, you're watching the BV-TV Today's Leader channel. Now, I'm hoping that my guest today is so busy that he hasn't realized I've sneaked in again for yet another chat with him for BV-TV. Viewers and listeners, it's not often I do this. Well, never until today. But this will be my fourth interview with the truly inspirational leadership expert, Rocky Romanella. The reason I keep sneaking back into his diary is that he is a guest who delivers such great value for all my audiences. He's the author of the brilliant and great value leadership book, Tighten the Lugnuts, The Principles of Balanced Leadership. And value is what we're going to talk about today. As I say, welcome back to BV-TV, Rocky Romanella. Hello, Rocky.
Hey, Malcolm, it's always a pleasure to be on your show. And I tell my kids, hey, yesterday we were sitting there at our shore house and I said, good news, Malcolm invited me back. I'm all excited. Got to get a little tan. I got to get myself ready for Malcolm's show. So I really appreciate it and I'm honored to be on the show.
Well, as the saying goes, this is only Rocky 4, and I believe there were Rocky 8 in the
Oh my God,
series.
I know. At some point, you're going to say enough of the Rockies.
Not at all. Rocky, thanks for kindly coming back, as I say, to guest, but especially on our new emerging channel, Today's Leader, because that's what we believe is important today, not yesterday's leadership, but today's leader. Viewers and listeners, in this talk show, I'll be chatting to Rocky in 3 parts. First part, we'll talk about why values matter. And in part 2, we'll talk about what are values, especially in today's altered world. And in part 3, I'm asking him how leaders should go about aligning their people behind the company's values and, importantly, policing to see that those values are lived and delivered. So, Rocky, let's jump straight into part 1. And it's your statement I read recently that values matter that I want to talk about. Why are you so passionate about this phrase? And what do you say about values mattering in your book?
Well, first of all, values are ultimately who you are, what you stand for, and what are the things that you won't compromise as a leader. And so it's about your values, and you set that tone from the top as the leader. And so values are what you're all about. And so you have to define that in your actions and the way you communicate and the way you handle difficult situations. And so for me, it's so important. And I think it starts with the values. It starts with those values, the things that define you as a leader. And so values matter in all we do, both in our personal and professional lives. And it defines who we are as the leader. And it kind of begins that legacy journey, right? We set our journey on our legacy through the values and the way we present ourselves and the way we conduct ourselves. It's sort of your brand. It becomes your brand promise. It becomes your brand identity. So for me, it all begins with and starts with the values that you have as a leader and how you portray them to those in your care.
Yeah, but sometimes I think that values are false. People say, oh, I've got values, and they haven't really got the values. Do you ever find that? I mean, I can almost smell it, that there's a rat away somewhere, as we would say over here, when some people start to push values down your throat and you're thinking, you ain't got any values.
Well, it's a difference between, right, the marketing of a product and the execution of the product, right? People can market products greatly, but ultimately they'll do the products work, and if they work, then that becomes the product identity and the product promise. Well, it's the same with your values. You can speak about values. I mean, you think about organizations and companies or people that have gotten themselves in trouble. Take an organization quickly, Malcolm. I'm sure if we walk through the cafeteria, they would have the value statement, the mission statements, all those things portrayed. But yet, so that's who they are, what they stand for. But number 3, which is, what are the things you won't compromise, or what got them in trouble? And so that's when the kind of the rubber meets the road, right? It's how do I act in these different situations? When someone brings me a problem, how do I respond to it? Leaders are not allowed to silently sanction bad behavior. As a leader, you can't look the other way because now you just sanction something. So when someone brings you a situation that needs to be addressed, you need to address it. Now, there could be different ways you address it. And in fact, if it's a small discretion, maybe you start out with your human resources person starting to look into it. But ultimately, it has to be addressed. People have to understand that it's important. And one thing I think sometimes leaders forget is when it's important to you, it becomes important to everybody.
Yeah.
So if values are important to you, they become important to everyone in the organization. But if they're not important to you, by the way you conduct yourself, by the way you handle yourself, by the way you do an investigation into a situation that's come up, well, then if it's not important to you, it's certainly not going to be important to them.
Mm. I've got this sneaking feeling, Rocky, and this is just a personal feeling from the hundreds of interviews I've done, that there's a bit of a split around at the moment, though. People saying, oh, I haven't got time for values. I'm so busy firefighting what's going on and things like that. And then others who are saying, yeah, things have changed. I've got to be more humane. I've got to be more compassionate. I've got to be more understanding. And in the past, it would almost seem like people were chugging along the same path. But I'm suggesting to you now, maybe they've gone into splintered paths. The ones that say, it don't matter, I'm too busy. The ones that saying, I need to be more humane.
Well, first of all, anybody who began that process saying, oh, now I have to become more humane should go look in the mirror and wonder what they've been doing prior to, right? Because if you think about it for a second, there's nothing more important than your people. And your people are your greatest assets in an organization. And listen, I understand profitability. I understand as leaders of an organization, you have to understand your profitability and you have to drive results. But profit is the result of you doing things the right way. The profitability is the applause that you get from your customers. It's the applause you get from your people. The way you treat them with dignity and respect. It's the way you treat your customers. Well, the profitability is an outcome of those things. For those individuals, it's really time for you to kind of have that little reckoning moment where you look in the mirror and you say, wow, there, but for the grace of God, I could be someplace in a much different perspective, by the way I have managed. So now I've got my wake up call. Let me manage appropriately, the right way, and do it treating my people with dignity and respect. For those who always have done it, it's more important now than ever, right? Because people are watching everything you do. You come back to work post-pandemic, you walk into that first time you walk into that restaurant, right? And you're not wearing a mask. And so here, in the US, we're now, mostly maskless, right? Well, now the first time you walk in, you're almost looking around. What's supposed to happen? It's an awkward feeling almost. Well, it's how the servers approach you. It's how the owner conducts himself. It's how all those things happen that matter. And it's all the values that restaurateur has as they're, interacting with us as customers for the first time. So at every level, whether you're the leader, whether you're the entrepreneur, whether you're a co-worker, it's the way you conduct yourself with honesty and sincerity. I think that's what's so important. And the last point I'll make is this: in difficult times, and when people don't always agree with the decisions, but they have to be made, what people are evaluating you on are what you do that stem from an honest heart? Because if it stems from an honest heart, I'll follow you.
Yeah.
But if I don't understand where it's coming from, or I don't believe what you do stems from an honest heart, I'm not going to follow you. Right? I mean, Winston Churchill during World War II may not have always articulated it. Of course, he did in many ways, but people, didn't know him personally. But what they believed is what he was doing stemmed from an honest heart, so they followed him.
Yes.
That you follow leaders that you believe their actions stem from an honest heart. And if you're trying to get your people to believe that, they'll believe you by your actions and the value systems that you have. And you may say, well, I don't know if necessarily I would do it that way. However, I understand why he or she's doing it, and I believe it comes from an honest heart. I'm in. Count me in. I think that's the important thing you're trying to express to your people.
Yeah, and we're getting on bordering on integrity as well, aren't we there? But fascinating. Rocky, just before we move to part two, I'd like to remind viewers and listeners of your website URL, which is, obviously, viewers, you can see it on the screen behind me, but let me read it out for our many listeners. Now, it's 3, that's the number 3, 360, and 60 is spelled SIXTY, 360 managementservices.com, 360 managementservices.com. Now, Rocky, just before we moved on, can you give us a brief summary of the book and why everyone needs to tighten their lug nuts? And I'll translate that into wheel nuts for us English people.
There you go. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Malcolm, for asking. So the book is a leadership book, but it's a leadership book with the thought that we're all leaders at one time or another, whether it's we're coaching the soccer team with our son or daughters, we're coaching the Little League Baseball, we're on the PTA, or we have the more traditional leadership role inside an organization, but we're all leaders at one time or another. Oftentimes people say, well, I'm an individual contributor, so I'm not a leader. Well, if you're that individual contributor who everybody goes to, right? Think of that person that we all know that everybody goes to. Hey, how do we do this? Why do we do it? They may not have anybody reporting to them, but they're a leader because their knowledge, their information sought out, and they leave things a little better than they found them. So the book is for all of us at one time or another, because we all have those leadership responsibilities, and it's written in a way that's both educational but entertaining. We work hard enough, our lives are difficult, why not have a little bit of fun? So there's some stories that kind of help talk about the different leadership styles or leadership opportunities that exist out there, or lessons that are out there. But it's also done in a way that should bring a smile to your face. And it's the journey of my over 40-year business career, though done in the third person, a gentleman by the name of Joe Scafone.
Right. And I mean, it is lovely. And now you and I have talked about many times the stories from it. And I always get a smile when I look at the picture of you in your toy car there on the front. All right, Rocky, moving to part 2, and we're staying on values. Now, this sounds a simple question, but I don't think it is. What are values, especially in today's altered world? And how does a leader and his or her team go about defining the company values? What's the approach? Where's the starting point?
Well, I think it starts with those three key questions. Who are we? Mm-hmm. What do we stand for? I think the first two can be articulated, right? So who are we as a company? What's our products? What's our services? What do we stand for? There could be high integrity, an organization that values safety. We always have a safety first climate. We'll never put our people in harm's way. The way they come to work, we want them to be able to go home at night. So there's safety training. And so you can articulate those two pretty well, right? Who are we and what do we stand for? Mm-hmm. The key is number 3. What are the things we won't compromise? And that could be very difficult at times because, for example, if you're missing your numbers for this quarter and you're close to making them, do you round up or do you round down the way you're supposed to round down? Yeah. Something as simple as that. I think sometimes we think about integrity only in terms of, I didn't rob, steal, or cheat. Well, how about integrity of your word? You sent me an email. I told you I would get back to you, but I didn't. Well, that's integrity of your word. So now I violated that. So I think what happens is 1 and 2 starts the process. Who are we? What do we stand for? So if Malcolm, if you and I were starting a business, we would lay that out. Who are we as a company? What are we trying to accomplish? What do we stand for? But number 3 would be the most important. What are the things that we won't do? What are the things that we would rather walk away from a customer or not do, even though it's maybe a great revenue opportunity because it violates our values? They have to be laid out and they have to be discussed with your people because that's the make or break. And the minute you violate that, the minute you look the other way because, I need to get this project done so that I can then hit a business plan number, but you shortcutted maybe a safety or you shortcutted maybe a quality item. Well, that's when people notice that. And that's when you lose your credibility because from that point forward, you just silently sanctioned or you just sanctioned bad behavior and you'll never get that out. Yeah. Once that genie's out, it never goes back in the bottle again. And so I think that's what's so important. So that would be the process. Who are we? What do we stand for? And what are the things that you won't compromise?
Excellent. Yes. And it is that sort of deep dive, I think, that's important. Otherwise, things get squashed over, don't they? Washed over and said, we've got wonderful staff and we're a wonderful company to work for, but sometimes underneath there are a few things not quite right.
Well, that it's almost the example too. If you think about it, you often heard that, you would never walk, through the kitchen, for example, in a restaurant. Well, maybe in our kitchen, in our business, we want you to walk through the
Yes. Yeah.
through the warehouse. It's interesting. If I could turn, please, without being disrespectful to your audience, there's a book behind me that is by Hershey, Milton Hershey, of course, Hershey. And when we were kids growing up, you could actually go to the Hershey factory and watch them make Hershey Kisses and Hershey chocolate. And so as a kid, it was just a great place to be on vacation. And, you were like, there's chocolate everywhere. Later on, though, in my adult life, I'm walking through one of my facilities, actually in Chicago, and I stopped and I thought to myself, that was my aha moment. And I thought to myself, what great confidence Hershey must have had in their people, because here's the customers walking through them making the chocolate. Now, as a kid, I was just excited they were making chocolate, but I thought about my operations and my facilities, and I thought to myself, well, if one of my customers ever walked through my facility again, will they ever ship another package? And from that moment forward, I challenged myself and all the people in my care to build their own Hershey factory, that their customers could walk through, that their operation would be under glass. And it's really the same concept with values. You have to let people know who you are, what's inside of you, what's in your heart, what's in your soul, what are the things that drive you as a leader, and what are the things that you stand for. It's almost like you're the Hershey factory, and this is what we stand for. And at any moment when challenged, I do the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's because I have the values. And it's the same as at any time a customer should be able to walk through one of my facilities or walk through my restaurant, through the kitchen, and say, wow, you know what? I'd ship another package. I'd eat here again. I'd recommend a family member. And that's how you have, that's the ability, that's your ability to really let people see inside of you as a leader, and their best way to see you as a leader. Now, inside an organization, it's probably the way you run the organization in terms of physically, whether the way you handle packages, the way you make the food. But as a leader, it's how do I look inside your heart? How do I look inside your soul? Do people believe through my actions that what I do stems from an honest heart? And they see that. That's your window into the leader by how they conduct themselves and how they handle themselves, not only in good times, but more importantly, how do they handle themselves in bad times or in difficult times is probably a better way of putting it.
Excellent analogy. I like that Hershey analogy. Rocky, now for part 3. We've got our values, but now we have to live them, don't we? How should leaders go about aligning their people behind the company values, and importantly, then policing to see that those values are lived and delivered?
Well, I think like we talked about a process, right? So I'm a process person. So the process we would start as a company with those 3 questions, you would do the same with yourself as an individual. But I would add one more important question. What is the word you want someone to use at the end of your career to describe you?
Right.
Now, most people won't say, "Oh, I want to be considered a bad leader or a difficult is a word I want to be used." No, of course not. So what's that word? And most people would say maybe values, integrity. For me, the word was thoughtful. I wanted to be considered a thoughtful leader. So if you start thinking about what it is I want someone to use, the word I want someone to use to describe me at the end of my career, well, then everything you do, those difficult moments when you're going to live your values, you start to build a mosaic to the word. So for example, for me, the word is thoughtful. I wanted to be considered a thoughtful leader. That means I look at things from its widest consequences. I think about how it impacts my people, how it impacts our customers, how it impacts our organization. So I would say as a leader, start this process as you believe you have good values, you believe you manage with a great value system, you believe values matter to you, but you really have to do an inventory every now and then. So it starts with, what's that word I want someone to use at the end of my career to describe me? And if that word has value and that word is a word that really describes someone who's a caring individual, right? If you say, I want to be rich, okay, that could be your word, but at the end of your career, they may say, there's that rich so and so and so and so that really didn't care a word care about me at all, but cared about becoming rich. So I think that's a great place to start as an individual. And then I think you live your values. You have to look at when unfortunate things happen or difficulties happen. This past year and a half has been difficult for everyone.
Yeah.
No one would want it. No one would ask for it. But it's how you handle it speaks to your character. And it also is your compass. It guides you, right? So if you have good values and you live your values and your character speaks, then what happens is it guides you through these difficult times.
Yes.
You think about it from the perspective of the individuals you're managing, not from yours. And I think that's what's so important. It becomes your compass, I think. And so you live your values and you look at these as, look, I'm dealt this hand. I have to play it. I wouldn't have asked for it, but I have to play it. But do I play it from a perspective of a high integrity, high value individual?
Yeah, I'm totally with you, and I personally feel very much about the importance of values. I remember many years ago, when I was sort of in my late teens, I was desperate to get a job. It was in Manchester. I was offered the job of selling Encyclopedia Britannica, if you can remember all the.
Absolutely.
And they took me on, and we were doing the training, and we said, well, what about the cool off period? Or, well, if you just put the piece of paper over, the people won't see that. So in front of, I think it was about 50 other trainees there, I stood up, walked to the front, and gave the guy all the pieces of paper he'd given me, and said, you're not for me, thank you, because I didn't want my personal values to be put to such awful situation as that, because I would never ever forgive myself. Yes, we are in a new and altered world, and yes, much has changed, and today's business leader has to have new skills such as agility, visibility, adaptability, compassion. But that doesn't mean that values such as trust, integrity have to go out of the window. Almost all old-fashioned values can be brought up to date, as I trust you've learned from my interview with Tighten the Lugnuts author and almost resident guest, Rocky Romanella. Thanks, Rocky.
Oh, Malcolm, that was a great summary, because I agree with you 100%. They never get old and they never go out of date. And it's been my pleasure and my honor to be on with you.